Hello and welcome to Silver Age Silver Screen, a podcast where we watch, discuss, and review sci-fi, cult, superhero, and other stereotypically geeky films. I'm your co-host, Casey Jarmes.
And I'm your other co-host, Riley Thorpe.
And Riley, did you know that the number 13 is unlucky?
I'd heard about it, yeah.
Well, there is a film series that currently has 13 films, and I'd say that that series has had some bad luck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's had a lot of bad luck, a lot of bad films. You know, some good ones, but, some ups and downs. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter anymore because they're bought by a bigger, better company.
Well, I don't know if better is the right word to describe Disney. More talented, but still not great in terms of...
You know what I mean.
Yeah. We, of course, are talking about the X-Men series. And despite the fact that half the movies are bad, this one was surprisingly good.
Yeah, not to give much away right now, but I'm going to be honest with you. I've seen this film and the X-Men movies a number of times, especially when I was younger. And when I was in my early mid-teens, especially I've seen this one a lot more. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I never was that big of a fan of this one. The very first film in the X-Men series. I always thought it was a little boring, a little dull, didn't think it held up pretty well. But I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I did enjoy rewatching it for this episode. This film is definitely a lot better than what I remember it. And added to the fact that it has a much bigger role to play in comic book characters in cinema than we give it credit, or than I definitely gave it credit for back then. Most of the people, what we associate with comic book films in the 20th century, largely just only included characters like Batman and Superman exclusively. There was also a decently popular Wonder Woman show starring Linda Carter, and then the Incredible Hulk show starring Lou Ferrigno as the Hulk. But in terms of big budget films, a lot of people really only know about or remember fondly the Batman franchise and the Superman franchise. And those were pretty much the only comic book adaptations that a lot of people think of. But the fact of the matter is that that's not entirely true. There were many, many attempts at adapting comic book characters and stories to the big screen that, for whatever reason, quality or viewership or just arguably not being that good, there were a lot of other comic book adaptations throughout the years, throughout the decades. Like there was a Shazam Captain Marvel serial show in the 40s, as well as there being a Captain America serial show and multiple straight-to-TV Captain America films, one of which we've reviewed. Check that out on our podcast.
And it was just wonderful, by the way.
Absolutely.
Fantastic film.
Straight
Love
to
it.
TV.
Love when Captain America destroys the cure for polio.
Captain America is played by Matt Salinger, son of the author of Catcher in the Rye. For some reason, I don't know. But yeah, it's great. In the Incredible Hulk show, there were other, what would later become more iconic comic book characters in the big screen, more mainstream. Thor made an appearance in the Incredible Hulk show, and I think I heard Daredevil even made a cameo in it. Also, in the 90s, there was films like Spawn, Steel. So the point is, there were a lot more attempts at adapting comic book characters to the big screen than we give it credit for. The problem is, the only reason why people remember Batman and Superman is because those were the only film franchises that were good. You know what I mean?
And honestly, good isn't even that accurate for a lot of the films. It's just everything else was so bad.
Exactly. Like I just mentioned, Steel, Spawn. I mean, Steel has Shaquille O'Neal as the main character. How good do you think it's gonna be from the get-go? No hate against the guy. He seems like a really cool guy, but the movie's shit. So really, throughout the history of cinema, there were many, many attempts at adapting comic books to the big screen. It's just that really the only good and popular ones that audiences liked, critics liked, that the studios were willing to take a chance on were Batman and Superman. Because arguably, well, not arguably, it's a fact, those are, at the time, the most popular comic book characters of all time. It's a statistical fact that more people around the world know the Superman symbol than they do the Christian cross.
Seriously, that sounds bullshit.
It does, but I've heard that that's true. I don't know how credible it is, but that's what I've heard.
I'm too lazy to fact check that.
The point is, you could make films about those characters because they were popular. The rest of the other characters, no one in the mainstream, quote-unquote mainstream, gave a fuck about Captain America. No one cared about Shazam up until recently, because no one knew and no one really cared. Then, the turn of the century happened. And something occurred. There was a big shift in the paradigm of comic book superhero films. And in between 1998 and 2002, there were 4 comic book films released. All of them featuring not quite mainstream characters, but yet despite that, were still smash hits both critically and commercially. And those films were Blade, Blade 2, Spider-Man, and the film we're reviewing today, X-Men. This film was among one of the most important films in comic book cinema. Arguably, without this, we would have no MCU. We would have no DCEU, although we don't really have much of a DCEU, to be perfectly honest with you. But the importance of the X-Men film from 2000 cannot be understated. Just how impactful it was to superheroes in cinema. Because it was that film that people realized, oh, we can take lesser known characters, take a chance on them, adapt them to the big screen, and turn a profit. It could be successful. It could be beloved. And that's exactly what this film was. This film starts with narration by Professor X, played by Sir Patrick Stewart, explaining human evolution and mutation, setting up the universe that this world is going to take place in, followed by a title sequence that was very much so mid-2000s CGI title sequences, like, a lot of fast, blurry, quick cuts, and stuff like that. It is very visually interesting, and the theme song was really cool. And then from that immediately, we cut to Auschwitz concentration camp, where a little boy is ripped from his parents and when trying to get back to them, develops his super powerful magnetic abilities, and he bends the prison gates, revealing that he is a mutant. What the hell?
No.
What the hell?
Oh god, it is shockingly, unexpectedly dark. I mean, I know Magneto's backstory, but I didn't know that they started the franchise with it. And it works, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no Schindler's List.
Oh,
it
yeah, no.
doesn't go into the true horrors, but it does establish Magneto as a character and the tragedy of his life. It's a very effective scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And from there, we cut to the, quote, not too distant future in an idyllic white picket fence suburban town. And it's like, oh, damn, that's a really jarring cut.
Yeah, screw the Holocaust. Let's talk about Rogue making out with her boyfriend.
Cuts to the suburban house where a young girl, the superhero Rogue, played by Anna Paquin, is hanging out in a room with her boyfriend. They kiss each other, but then it's revealed that she too has developed a mutation where she is able to absorb people's life energy and their life force simply by touching them, and she has no control over it whatsoever. She basically puts her boyfriend in a coma, gives him a seizure and puts him in a coma. And as she's crying, freaking out in the corner, her parents are screaming, "Call the police!" And again, it's like, what the hell? Like, this is surprisingly dark.
Here's my thing with that scene, though.
Yeah.
Why Rogue thinks she killed boyfriend when kiss him? Like, if I was making out with someone and they just fainted, I wouldn't assume that it was my fault. I'd assume they would have had, like, a brain aneurysm. I mean, she's accurate within the film, but I wouldn't assume that it was Rogue's fault.
She does later go on to explain that she, felt his presence and his energy.
Fair enough.
Like, she could feel something within herself that she's the one responsible.
Fair enough. After that, it cuts to Washington, D.C., to a building that is very clearly not Capitol Hill. I just like to say the sets in this movie are good, but that is not what Capitol Hill looks like. Just saying.
No.
Actually, you know what? Not too distant future, this movie, it takes place after the Capitol was burned down tomorrow.
Exactly. I mean...
Current events. Fascists to overthrow the United States a few days before we recorded this. Woohoo!
Bryan Singer can predict the future. Yeah. Democracy.
But anyway, the Senate are debating a new bill to register mutants and keep track on them. And the main people debating this are Dr. Jean Grey, a mutant advocate who's important to the film, and Senator Robert Kelly, who's just Oh god, he's vile. Like, they use so much language and imagery from homophobes, and he feels like he's about to go home to the Westboro Baptist Church. He's just awful. Although, can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
And this is overall the main thing that kind of always felt a little weird about the X-Men. Senator Kelly has a lot of good points. Like, X-Men's discrimination allegory. In the 60s, it was for segregation. Nowadays, it's often used for gay rights. But, like, Senator Kelly makes good points that the government should be afraid of Charles Xavier's ability to mind control anyone, or Magneto's ability to, as we see in later films, move continents. Like,
Yeah.
that's the problem I always have with mutants. The idea behind the story is discrimination is bad. Fearing other people is bad. But, like, they give people reason within the narrative for it to be right. They, throughout this film, say that mutants are the next stage in human evolution. Not just people, something different. And, I mean, I agree that you should not fear other groups of people. But it's not fearing other people to be kinda scared of the fact that Cyclops has uncontrollable death vision.
Yeah, and the fact that there's also in here a guy who can control all metal. Like you said, also have a guy to control people's minds and essentially control their very being.
That's the problem that always bugged me about X-Men as a concept is it's a racism allegory, but within the concept of the fiction, racists aren't really wrong because of how it's written. And obviously, Senator Kelly, any sympathy the audience has for him immediately goes out the window because he starts talking about, like, I don't want them teaching my children. I want to lock them all up. Like, he's awful. He's just the fucking worst. But, like, X-Men kind of... I don't know. This is a discussion for a more in-depth video essay or some shit. I don't know.
Right, but the point is from this film, it is a bit of a mixed message.
I mean, the film's villain is a Holocaust survivor who's really hesitant about the government wanting to lock up every member of a minority group.
After Senator Kelly basically turns the Senate against Jean Grey.
Also, side note, I hate to interrupt, but it's a really minor thing. He calls her Miss Grey in this scene. Senator Kelly consistently refers to Jean as Miss Grey. She has a doctorate, you dick.
Fucking asshole. I mean, they basically set up Senator Kelly as the most despicable, vile character of all, even though he has no superpowers. Immediately after Kelly turns the Senate against Jean Grey to push forward with the Mutant Registration Act, Professor X and Magneto, who are both in the audience, leave the room and go have a talk in the hallway. From there, we're introduced to Patrick Stewart as Professor X, and we see Sir Ian McKellen as Magneto. And I just want to say right here, right now, the casting in this movie is on fucking point.
Well, the casting's a mixed bag. It's just those fucking two. The old British dudes steal the show. Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen do phenomenal jobs in this movie, and honestly throughout the entire series.
Yeah, let me rephrase. Most of the casting is on point. Ian McKellen is fantastic as a supervillain who's suffered so much and is willing to do whatever it takes to meet his end goal. Patrick Stewart is great at being the voice of reason, the leader, the father figure of the X-Men. And as we will get into it pretty soon, Hugh Jackman as fucking Wolverine. Holy shit. I mean, there were some casting choices in here that I would say I was like, I'm not so sure about that, but like those three in particular, goddamn are they amazing. One thing that really surprised me upon rewatching this film, they went a very different route with the X-Men as a whole. Typically, the X-Men are, as represented in the comics and animated shows, they're very colorful, bright, themed superheroes. The individual characters have so much personality.
Yeah, but counterpoint, would you like them to wear black leather and all be moody assholes? Because I think that's better.
Yes. Yeah, of course, because that's what we got. The point I'm trying to make is this. If you're looking for comic accuracy, this film is not it at all. Even like the details of like certain character relationships, it's just like that makes no sense when it comes to its relation to the comic books. That said, this is an adaptation. It's a reinterpretation of the source material. Do I think that this reinterpretation of the characters always works? Not entirely. But I do think, as a standalone film, there are a great number of strengths, despite the fact there are a great number of weaknesses. One of the things that I think is a big standout from this film is the exploration of superpowers as a tragedy and as a curse. That was something that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby pioneered, firstly with their Fantastic Four comics. The idea that these characters, they're more than just superheroes. They're people with emotions. They feel angst. They feel regret, anger. They have powers, but they don't necessarily like them. As we've seen in this film, because of their mutations, Magneto and Wolverine had horrific, inhumane experiments put upon them. We don't see it with Magneto, but we can assume, and it is basically confirmed in the future of this franchise, particularly in X-Men First Class, that Magneto was experimented on for years in the concentration camp. Wolverine, in this film, we get snippets of it, but as the films go on, we see these experiments put onto him. And made worse by the fact that Wolverine says in the film, when Rogue asks him, do the claws hurt when he pops them out? And he says, every time. These powers are a curse to these people, especially with Rogue. She's a teenage girl who her first kiss was ruined because she put her boyfriend into a 3-week coma. Like, that's horrific. That was one thing a theme that really stood out to me upon rewatching it that I didn't totally pick up on when I was younger, is that the idea of powers as a curse. And I think that that's one of the things that this film explores extremely well, in addition to what exactly the X-Men are meant to represent. The idea of oppression, injustice, prejudice, all that. And that's something that is also very well explored.
Yeah. So, back to the plot. Rogue runs away from home. She ends up in Canada, where she stumbles into an underground fight ring where a guy goes up against the Wolverine, this tough as nails, undefeated fighter played by Hugh Jackman, who is ripped, but not as insanely ripped as you would expect.
Thing about that is Hugh Jackman has actually come out publicly and stated how he's actually disappointed in his physique for this movie.
I have no room to fucking talk. He looks amazing compared to me. And the dude was cast 3 weeks before the movie started filming. Give him a break. I just joking.
But I will say, he only worked out for like 6 weeks, when in actuality he would later go on to find out that you need 6 months to get as jacked as he does later in this franchise.
Jackman.
Interesting thing about Hugh Jackman's casting in this is that when he was cast as Wolverine, he was essentially a nobody. He was just some soap opera actor in Australia. Then out of nowhere, he gets cast as one of the most beloved comic book characters of all time, Wolverine. People hated it. There was so much outrage at the idea that they would cast a man like that. I mean, in the comics, Wolverine is supposed to be very short and very stocky. I believe in the comics he's 5'3".
Something like that.
And then they cast this 6'2", handsome Australian dude who does soap operas. And people are like, this is the dumbest casting choice ever. The first shot, the first scene that we see this character in this movie is the most badass intro in a comic book movie I've seen in a while. This guy gets into a cage fight, kicks him around a little bit, and then Wolverine just knocks him out in like 10 seconds.
Yeah, like the other guy punches him and breaks his hand on Wolverine's metal bones. Which, side note, Wolverine's a bit of a dick, I'd like to say. That's cheating. That poor man.
I don't know. He's just trying to make a living, you know? Another fun thing about the casting of Wolverine is the studio was originally going to go with actor Russell Crowe to play Wolverine, actually. He turned it down inadvertently because he did not know what a Wolverine is. When he heard they were offering them the role of the Wolverine, he thought that they meant like a wolf. And the film he had done previously was Gladiator, where he played Marcus Aurelius, I believe that's his character's name. But in that film, his character is synonymous with a lot of like wolf imagery. I think that's, from what I've heard, like that's his sigil. He said no to playing Wolverine because he didn't want to play another character who's a wolf type character. The problem is, wolves and Wolverines are not the same character. No.
Wolverines are like badgers, right?
Yeah, they're like badgers, only like bigger and somehow more vicious. So he turned it down because he didn't know what a Wolverine was. He thought it was a wolf. Then they cast Hugh Jackman. And the funniest part about this story is that Hugh Jackman didn't know what a Wolverine was either. He also thought they were talking about a wolf. So he modeled his mannerisms and his behavior off of that of wolves. He found out, like halfway through filming, oh shit, Wolverines are a completely different animal than wolves? Oh, I had no idea. I mean, you can't give either of them too much shit for it because they're both from Australia. There's no Wolverines in Australia. But it's just so funny the fact that neither of them knew what a Wolverine was. They both thought it was a wolf. And one completely turned the role down, one made it his own and became such a beloved actor in a comic book role that people are begging for his return in the MCU.
Yeah.
Wolverine's a badass in this scene, is my point.
After that, Wolverine goes to the bar where Rogue is just hiding out, and the guy he got into a fight with confronts him about him cheating. They get in a fight. Wolverine reveals his cool metal claws that stick out of his knuckles and runs away. Rogue hides out in Wolverine's trailer to get away because she don't got anywhere to go. Wolverine ends up finding her and lets her in the cab, and they talk for a bit about who they are.
I just have a few questions about that. One, why the hell did Rogue go to Alberta, Canada?
I mean, she wanted to go with her boyfriend before she put him in the coma.
I don't know, it's just so weird that
after
she would
that,
go... Like, oh yeah, she's a runaway. Where am I gonna go? Fucking no one gives a shitsville, Canada.
Hold on, Alberta's not... Well, okay.
The town she goes to, is...
Okay. Also, she's from Mississippi. She traveled north very far. Could probably found someplace nicer to stay at.
Also, where did Rogue get her name? Wolverine asks her, like, what's your name? And she goes, Rogue. What kind of a name is that? I don't know.
Well, they have to call her Rogue because Rogue's name in the comics is complicated. It's complicated. We don't have time to get into it. Also, in that scene where Wolverine's, like, introducing himself to Rogue and he, like, states that he lost his memory years ago and is just a drifter, he, like, shows Rogue his dog tags, which say Wolverine on them. I don't think that... I assume... Maybe I'm missing something, but I assume those are from his time in the army, right?
The reason why it says Wolverine, it's explained in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Okay, well that movie came out like years later. I want to know, in 2000, why his military dog tags do not say his name. Why do they say Wolverine?
I don't know. Mystery, I guess. But let me tell you something. In X-Men Origins Wolverine, the excuse they give as to why it says Wolverine is surprisingly very, very shitty. Like, it's something so insignificant, but it's so stupid.
You can just say it.
Basically, he volunteers to get the adamantium laced onto his skeleton by going with Stryker and basically going to this military operation, whatever. And he asks him, he's like, okay, once you're gonna do this, you're gonna be like a super soldier, so what do you want your code name to be? Keep in mind, this is happening while he's like strapped up to the machine. He's in the machine, and he's like, what do you want your code name to be? He goes, the Wolverine. And then they have like a CGI sequence of them making a dog tag with the name Wolverine on it, and then it cuts to him back in the machine with the dog tags on, which means that while they were making those dog tags, they spent that entire time, God knows how long, Wolverine was just sitting in that machine waiting for it to get done.
Well, that's dumb, and that movie is stupid.
Yeah.
Anyway, another thing weird when we talk about this movie in relation to X-Men Origins Wolverine, that movie, like, Wolverine and Sabretooth are like brothers or whatever in that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, that's interesting. Keep that in mind, because they aren't that in this. As they're driving down the road, Rogue tells Wolverine, hey, you should wear a seatbelt. And he says, I don't need to wear a seatbelt. And then immediately they crash and he gets thrown out the window because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Perfect timing. Sabretooth, he could have jumped them like 10 minutes earlier, but he was just waiting for the perfect time to crash that car and make Wolverine look like an idiot.
Exactly.
So they get attacked by a mutant dude named Sabretooth, who's a monster man. He has black eyes and teeth and roars like a tiger.
To be perfectly honest with you, this is one of the things, especially when I watched it when I was younger, this is probably one of the biggest disappointments of this film. And I do feel the exact same way today, even more so, arguably. They totally waste Sabretooth in this. Long story short, this film sets up the idea that where this future of this story is going is they're going to be exploring Wolverine's past and trying to uncover it. And the second film in the franchise does continue the story. And it's just weird to me, the idea that they so clearly established that this is the direction they're going to go with this story, and they're going to take with Wolverine. And they follow through with it, but at the same time, they introduce a character from the comics who is Wolverine's mortal enemy. These two have a history. They are one of the most iconic comic book rivalries ever. Like Sabretooth and Wolverine. They have such a deep-seated personal history and hatred of each other with a backstory to match it up. And the idea that they're going to set up exploring Wolverine's origin, where he came from, how he got the adamantium on his skeleton, and then introduce a character who, in many interpretations, even in this franchise, is directly involved in how that happened, in that backstory. And then they just fucking waste him like he's nothing. Like, Sabretooth barely speaks in this movie, and when he does, he never speaks to Wolverine.
Does he even say anything to Magneto? All of his lines of dialogue, I'm pretty sure, are saying creepy shit to Storm.
No, he said a few things to Magneto, but after being ejected from the car, Wolverine is thrown, like, a lot. Like, Wolverine is thrown very far.
Good thing he's basically immortal, because he gets the shit beat out of him many times in this movie.
Yeah, he spends a large portion of this movie unconscious. Just saying. But he gets up from the car accident, and Rogue can see that not only does he have metal skeleton, but the wound that he has on his head, the giant gash, heals up almost immediately. Again, which is obviously very faithful to the comics, as it should be. But Wolverine, when walking back to the car, is attacked by Sabretooth, and you think, man, this is his ultimate rival. We're gonna see some cool, like, badass rivalry here, and it just doesn't happen. He knocks out Wolverine, and then Storm and Cyclops magically appear, basically scare Sabretooth away, and rescue Rogue, and bring Rogue and Wolverine to the Xavier Mansion. We cut to Sabretooth walking back to Magneto's lair.
Wait, hold on. He presumably took a plane or something, but the way you phrase that, walking back, I'm just imagining that he walked back from Alberta to New York.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing too. A lot of the travel time just doesn't totally make a whole lot of sense. Like, characters will just appear and then appear somewhere and then, like, be somewhere else immediately. And I don't know, some of the travel time doesn't make a whole lot of sense a lot of the time. But from there, it immediately cuts to Magneto's lair, where we see Toad, played by Ray Park, who played Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace. Just throwing that out there. You got Darth Maul in this movie.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, Ray Park's whole career is playing these dudes who are acrobatic, amazing fighters. And that's what Toad is. He's also a creepy loser, but, you know, he's acrobatic.
He shows up to Magneto's lair, where Toad is spray painting something, we don't know what, and he tells Magneto that the mutant escaped. But Sabretooth was able to snag Wolverine's dog tags. And from there, we assume that the mutant he wants is Wolverine. Why does he want Wolverine? Oh, we don't know.
Hey, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. I just realized something. Question about film. How did Sabretooth know where Wolverine and Rogue were? how did he know who they were?
Those are very good questions, my friend.
Like, Magneto's plan hinges on him using the abilities of a complete, absolute stranger who he doesn't know where they are, and they just find him. That's weird.
That is a very good point. The next scene opens up with... Yeah, this film has a great number of plot holes, but Wolverine wakes up with Jean Grey, who we saw speaking to the Senate earlier, treating him for his wounds. And then he wakes up, basically puts her in a chokehold, throws her to the ground, and starts running through the Xavier mansion. Now, I'm just going to throw this out there. You wake up naked in a laboratory with a stranger putting a needle into you. You're completely naked. You find some random clothes. Then some voice starts speaking to you in your head. You're in a laboratory. You take an elevator up. Turns out it's a mansion. Then a bunch of school kids start running through it. Turns out it's a school. I'm just saying, Wolverine, he had some grounds to freak out there. Just saying, that's pretty scary.
He didn't just have grounds. Like, what the shit was Charles doing with the talking in his mind as he's running through the halls?
Yeah, dude, you should be focusing on your physics class that you're teaching at that second.
Yeah, also, those kids look like they're 12, and he's teaching the weak and strong anthropic principles? This really is a school for gifted youngsters.
Exactly. And why would you bring the brutal savage who doesn't know who he is, he's scared, he's got really dangerous mutation, potentially. Why does he encourage him to come into his classroom where he has like a group of 12-year-olds?
I mean, to be fair, Charles Xavier has super cool mind control powers. Wolverine can't do shit.
Very true. Very true. It's in that classroom that he meets Charles Xavier. He also meets Jean Grey, played by Famke Janssen, Cyclops, played by James Marsden, and Storm, played by Halle Berry. And let me just say right now, I think all three of them are extremely well cast in this.
Really?
I do. I do think so. Not great necessarily, but I do think that they are well cast. Would prove to be, at least in conception, at least. The problem is, from then on, begins a love triangle between Wolverine, Jean Grey, and Cyclops. This is a major part of not only this movie, but like as the franchise continues. And it is every single movie, like the worst part about the movie.
You know, honestly, I will give you James Marsden being well cast. He is a perfect Cyclops in that he's an insufferable prick who you just hate and want him to die every single time you ever see him. James Marsden is great at that.
He is good.
But also, I don't like love triangle between Wolverine and douchebag and boring character who doesn't really do much in this film.
Right.
I don't like love triangles in general. Love triangles where 2/3 of the characters kind of suck. Not my cup of tea, not gonna lie.
It sucks from a character perspective, and I'll tell you why. Because right there, A, it's shitty, cheap, and lazy. B, it completely does a disservice to all the characters involved in the triangle. Cyclops and Jean Grey were at least told that they're in a committed relationship with one another. When Wolverine comes in, now he's being an asshole and a homewrecker. So now Wolverine's just a piece of shit, which, yes, that's in his character, but it's like, why the fuck are you going after the married woman? Or at least I assume they're married. I don't know if it's...
I believe they're just dating.
Okay, but they share a bedroom. Just throwing that out there. Which I have no objection to whatsoever. Just, I don't know why I said that. And then it takes Cyclops, a character who, yes, you're right, is an insufferable jackass, but this film was potentially a means of making him not an insufferable jackass, you know? It's like how Iron Man is portrayed in the MCU. In the comics, he's a fucking asshole. But in the MCU, he's a really likable guy trying to fix his mistakes. The point is, they turned an unlikable character from the source material good. They could have done that with this film, but instead, he's resorted to the douchey boyfriend in the way of Wolverine and Jean Grey. And, speaking of Jean Grey, she's just resorted to the boring love interest, you know? And it just completely does a disservice. I think James Marsden, Famke Janssen, and Halle Berry are great in conception for this casting. It's just the love triangle ruined Cyclops and Jean Grey, and also the way that the story goes, just in general.
And talking about Storm, she's not really focused much in this movie. She has one scene that really focuses on her as a character, and it's a fantastic scene, but other than that, she's just kind of there.
Right, exactly. Like, for the first hour, she really doesn't even have that many lines. And the funny thing that struck me was literally, like, almost exactly at the hour mark in, I realized, is Halle Berry doing an accent? And she is.
Yeah, she is.
She's doing this, like, because Storm, Aurora Monroe, is from Africa. But Halle Berry in this film is doing a, like, pseudo half-American, half-African accent, and it just completely fucks with her performance. Because up until that point, it's like, in addition to the idea that she hasn't received much screen time, there's something up with her performance that I'm not totally getting the feel of. And then it was an hour into an hour 45-minute movie that I realized she's doing an accent. And it's not even that great of an accent. It reminded me a lot of Elizabeth Olsen's portrayal of the Scarlet Witch in the MCU.
How she had a thick Eastern European accent in Age of Ultron, and it's just gone less and less noticeable in each subsequent film.
Exactly.
I mean, that has justification because she's been living in the US.
I mean, so is Storm, technically.
Fair enough.
It reminded me a lot of, like, Scarlet Witch and, like, Civil War, where it's like there's a sort of American mixed with European accent. It's like, I don't know. But I do think that the three of them were well cast. It's just the script didn't totally allow them to, like, fully let themselves shine. It predominantly just focused on Wolverine, Rogue, and to a lesser extent, Magneto and Professor X.
Yeah.
The rest of the X-Men are just kind of there.
Yeah. So basically, Professor X, he explains that the Xavier Institute is a school. It's a safe haven for mutants. It can be a home for Wolverine and Rogue. Side note, there's a minor side plot in this movie with Rogue being in a romantic relationship with this guy Bobby, who's Iceman in the comics, and I don't really care about it. It's not given enough screen time to make me care about. I just want to bring it up because Iceman's introduction has Pyro creating a fireball, and then Iceman freezes it solid, and that's not how anything works.
No, not at all.
No, you can't freeze fire solid. I just had to get that off my chest, because that is so goddamn dumb.
At this point, I really want to talk about really sort of the elephant in the room for me, and it's the fact that this film is not comic accurate at all. Obviously, I did mention earlier that the film doesn't have to be. I don't expect it to be. But there does come a point where it's like, did you even try to adapt the source material? I mean, Wolverine is very faithful. Magneto and Professor X are very faithful, despite the fact that Professor X is not supposed to be British. He's supposed to be from Boston. It's just like, Rogue in the comics is like the most confident, upbeat character on the team. Like, yes, she has that power that is a curse to her, and I do think that that is well explored in this film. It's just, she's supposed to be the character who, despite her powers, she takes all that negative energy that she would get from that and she flips it as confidence to make herself a badass character that always does what's right and always has hope at the end of the day. And in this film, she's just an angsty little teen girl. And I'm sorry, Anna Paquin didn't do the greatest job in this. That one, I do think. She did fine, but I just never really got into her performance. I thought it was, like, okay at best. That said, her and Wolverine do have, like, a very good and believable relationship in the film.
I know she's one of the main focus characters, but I didn't really feel anything towards her in this film.
Not at all.
Although I will say, as you mentioned, she allows us to get use of one of my favorite tropes, which is stoic badass becomes parent figure to child or teenager. I like that trope a lot.
Mhm.
It made me like Wolverine in this movie way more than I expected I would. Just his relationship as this protector father figure for Rogue. I like Batman. I like the Mandalorian. This is a good trope. Wolverine taking care of children and teenagers and being gruff but also caring. It's a good thing.
Exactly. And another thing that bugs me a little bit is the fact that in this film, Rogue starts a romantic relationship with Iceman. In the comics, she has a romantic relationship with Gambit. Now, I understand the importance of introducing Iceman into this series. Like, he does actually, as the films go on, serve a bigger purpose, and they do build up to that. But, I don't know. Couldn't you just make, like, if you're gonna make Rogue a teenage girl, you can definitely make Gambit a teenage boy. Like, this rebellious, bad boy, I don't give a shit attitude. You could totally do that as, like, a relationship. And I would actually have believed that more, because it's just kind of like, oh yeah, she's this girl who's afraid of people because of all her past. And then this one guy, I don't know, we're in the middle of a classroom, turns fire into ice because that's possible, and then introduces himself and then makes a rose made out of ice on her desk, and now suddenly they're like in love. I don't believe that relationship at all. To be honest, it's been a while since I've seen the other ones, but I really don't think the other two X-Men, at least in the original trilogy, do much in the way of convincing me that they do have a good relationship. It's just not believable. I think it would have been so much more believable had she, like, gone for the bad boy, like, Gambit style. I don't know. Just me. But it does come a point where I'm okay with not following the source material, but there does need to be a limit.
And you know, I'm not an X-Men guy. I'm not really a fan of X-Men. Like, my main exposure is seeing half of these movies and watching X-Men Evolution as a kid. I have no clue what Riley's talking about, and I'm just sitting here smiling. Back in the plot, Toad and a new minion of Magneto's, Mystique, who's a shapeshifter. Side note, Mystique looks amazing in this movie. Fantastic makeup work.
She's played by Rebecca Romaine. Yeah, you're right. The makeup looks fantastic. Fun fact about this too, once filming wrapped up, they had like an after party and they all took shots. And I don't know if she drank too much or whatever. From what I heard, I think she only had one shot, but she threw it up. And not because of the alcohol, but because she had, over the weeks of filming, ingested unfortunately large amounts of that blue paint and prosthetics that they put on her. So she just vomited up a lot of blue puke.
Oh, that's actually kind of awful. Like, I fully understand how they lessened and lessened Mystique makeup in later movies, but it does look amazing in this one.
Right, and I do think the transformation from her to, like, other people, the CGI doesn't hold up quite as well, but as a 2-decade-old film, I don't know, I felt like it worked, personally.
Yeah.
Like, in general, like, the CGI, except for this one shot in particular that we'll go into later on, like, this one shot has not aged well whatsoever. It's horrendous. But, I don't know, I thought the special effects were used very sparingly, only when necessary, and I thought that they were very well done, and do work for the film being 20 years old. One thing that does not hold up whatsoever for me, however, is the stunt work on wires. Like when characters are thrown or blasted to the other side of the room, they're on wires. It looks so bad. Like, you can't see the wires, obviously, but god damn it, it looks so fake. I don't know, that's one thing that took me out of it. Like, god damn it, you had me with the CGI, but the wire work just didn't work.
Toad and Mystique kidnap Senator Kelly, that douchebag from the beginning. You remember him. It was an hour ago in this recording, because this is going to be our longest episode ever, I have a feeling.
Yeah, probably.
They kidnap Senator Kelly and bring him to Magneto's lair. And Magneto uses this cool science machine to create a shitload of radiation. And then they just throw Kelly in a cage. And he squeezes out of it using his new, how would you phrase those powers? How would you describe them?
It's weird, because at first I thought it was like elasticity. But then later on, when he escapes and he's crawling out onto the beach. Like, you can see on his back, he has, like, gills, and he can transform his body into, like, a gelatinous form.
He turns into a slime girl.
Yeah.
That's what...
Yeah.
Magneto has a machine to turn homophobic senators into slime girl waifus. And he sneaks out of the... Yeah.
You're right,
and he,
you're right.
yeah. He, like, squeezes out of the bars, and, like, Magneto and Sabretooth rush in, and then Magneto... He just, like, locks Sabretooth in the cage. It's not Sabretooth's fault he escaped. You're a dick, Magneto.
I mean, in fairness, Sabretooth has been fucking up a lot the past few days.
Not in that scene!
He had Kelly, like, by the wrist, and still, like, it fell out of his grip.
Slime person!
Whatever.
That time I got reincarnated as a slime! Is an anime that's just kind of okay.
Alright. Cool.
Also, I just glazed over it, but we get scenes of Kelly interacting with Magneto, and oh god, the dialogue they write for Magneto and Ian McKellen's performance, it is phenomenal. He is the best part of this movie.
There's a reason why Ian McKellen and even Patrick Stewart are knighted by the Queen of England. They are fantastic.
Yeah. And there's this one minor shot earlier when Sabretooth brings him Wolverine's dog tags and he reaches for them and you can see like his tattoo. Like, God, Magneto is fantastic in this movie.
And Magneto, he's a great character played by a great actor, and he is very well written. Especially better written than the fucking love triangle. Yeah, he's great. Basically, Magneto has somehow created a new machine that is able to create radiation field that any human caught in it is irradiated and their genetics are mutated. So he's turning humans into mutants.
Yeah, and we're just going to gloss over all of the scientific issues with that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because they specifically mention that the ionizing radiation that alters DNA and creates mutants does not affect mutants, which I don't think that's how that works. Just saying.
Nope, not at all. Jean Grey shows Wolverine to his room where he just doesn't let up on the flirting with her one bit. He's like, why don't you read my mind? And she says, no. Why? You afraid you're gonna like what you see? And then she does read his mind anyway. I mean, I don't know. You would have think she said, my boyfriend is like a couple doors down. Chill, Wolverine. Yeah, so she reads his mind, and despite the fact that he doesn't remember being experimented on, she uncovers memories of him being experimented on, and he can't even see them. She just sees them and walks away. He has a confrontation with Cyclops, basically telling him, like, hey, stay away from my girl, whatever. Then that night, because Jean Grey unlocked those memories, he starts having a nightmare. And that is coincidentally the exact same time where Rogue... Also, before I continue on with that, I just find it hilarious that Rogue is a runaway 17-year-old girl who was just attacked by a mutant, almost blown up in a fiery inferno. They bring her to a mansion and then they just say, all right, now you're a student at our school, get to class. But anyway, so she goes to visit Wolverine because reasons. She tries waking him up. She wakes him up from a nightmare, and he stabs her in the chest with his claws. And they show the claws coming out her back. Again, this movie has some brutal scenes.
And that is why, from then on, Wolverine locked his door at night.
Yeah. While screaming for help, Rogue touches Wolverine, and she starts absorbing his life energy. But it's also revealed in that scene that if she touches a mutant, she can absorb their powers, which is also what she can do in the comics. She also, in the comics, absorbed Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers' powers, and she did it so much that she is now permanently able to shoot laser bolts and fly and is indestructible and basically has all of Ms. Marvel's powers. But we're just going to ignore that comic accurate side of it.
Okay, no. I'm not gonna...
I'm just...
That's not a good point.
It's really not.
Know it.
I'm not, I know. I'm just saying. I'm satirizing the bitching and moaning that entitled comic book fans have.
Well, hard to tell the difference sometimes.
Yeah, so she absorbs his powers, and she uses his healing factor to heal herself from her wound, which also begs the question, does that mean that she is... Like, while she's touching him, she's growing bone claws in her wrist at that point? That's never really explored.
Oh, shit, you're right.
That's never really explored.
Ow, that would be painful.
Yeah,
she would...
She has bones growing in her forearms because she's touching him. That's like...
I mean, they went away.
That's really... yes, but still, while she's touching him, that's pretty morbid.
Rogue heals herself by borrowing Wolvie's powers, although it is mentioned that if she had held on to Wolverine for too long, she would have fucking killed him.
Mm-hmm. Wolverine wakes up from a coma, his second, third knockout this movie. He wakes up, Professor X explains what's going on. Also, that scene where Professor X was showing Wolverine around the Xavier Institute and telling him the situation, that's a big exposition dump.
Oh, yeah.
Not the biggest fan of that, but I don't know. What are you going to do? Senator Kelly escapes, and he has new stretchy powers. He makes his way onto a beach where he's completely naked, and everyone is just staring at him. And that's when we get our Stan Lee cameo. Stan Lee staring at a naked senator who was just experimented on by a supervillain. It's fun.
I just gotta imagine his internal dialogue like, okay, how are you gonna get yourself out of this one, Bobby? This is a big scandal, but other people have been in biggers and got away. Oh, who am I kidding? I know my voters. They will accept literally anything.
And I also just imagine Stan Lee's inner monologue where he's filming that scene like, in the 60s, when I created the X-Men, I never would have imagined that there'd be a live-action film adaptation. And I never would have imagined that my cameo in it would be staring at a naked man on a beach.
After that, Rogue is the next day sitting out on a bench when her boyfriend Bobby comes up to her and says, "Hey, you used your powers on another mutant. That's not allowed. Professor X is going to expel you, so you should just run away." And then Rogue runs away.
Yeah. And then it's revealed that that was Mystique all along.
Yeah, it's just Mystique. But seriously, Rogue? He's just some random guy. Actually, talk to Professor X first before running away.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Like you've had,
dumb girl.
You've had one...
Stupid teenager.
You've had one conversation with this dude, and now all of a sudden you're like completely distraught.
She runs away. The other X-Men are like, ooh, we need to go find her. And Professor X introduces his cool mutant locating machine, Cerebro, so they can go find her. And they discover she's at a train station, and like Wolverine goes after her to rescue her. But as soon as they're done using Cerebro, Mystique sneaks in and sabotages it.
Yep.
Wait, hold on. How does Cerebro work? Because it has fluids in it, and she puts a different fluid in it. That's weird. I always thought it was like a computer. What is Cerebro?
I don't think it's ever really explained what exactly it is. Maybe in First Class it is. Well, and here's the thing about that is, in this film, in that scene where he's locating Rogue, we learn a few things. One, that Magneto helped Charles Xavier create it. B, Magneto has somehow found a way to block himself from the use of Cerebro, so Professor X cannot read his mind for some reason. We don't know how.
Although, Professor X could probably just locate, Sabretooth or Mystique or Toad. Just saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying! I was going to get to that. Also, we learned that Jean Grey isn't powerful enough psychic to use Cerebro yet, but here's my thing. In the X-Men franchise, by Days of Future Past, which is like the 5th film in the main X-Men series, you just gotta give up on continuity. Just don't even try.
Oh god, I've only seen a few X-Men movies, but First Class is really good.
Yeah.
And the sort of childhood friends, almost sibling-like relationship between Professor X and Mystique, it's great.
Yeah.
It kind of makes all of this film super weird.
Right.
Just saying.
Exactly. But in First Class, it's established that not only did Magneto not help Charles Xavier build Cerebro, but Charles Xavier didn't even build Cerebro. Hank McCoy, Beast, built it. And then just magically oh yeah, we need some super powerful psychic to use it. Oh, and now we have one. Whatever. And then also in X-Men First Class, Charles Xavier very clearly knows how and why Magneto is able to block out his psychic powers.
It's because of the cool helmet.
Right, exactly. And just saying, this franchise, at a point, they just gave up on continuity. They were just like, fuck it, let's do whatever we want for our individual movie. That went through the hands of so many different filmmakers, that franchise. Yeah, so they find Cerebro. Wolverine tries to convince them to let him go with them to find Rogue, but they say no. But Wolverine steals Cyclops' bike, and he gets there first before Storm and Cyclops can get there. He gets on the train, has a really nice heart-to-heart with Rogue. He's like saying, look, I'm not one for semantics, I'm not one for like keeping a strong relationship with people, but I don't know, it seems like they're good people. She tells him about how depressed she is, and it was at that point while Wolverine and Rogue are talking on the train, and Cyclops and Storm are in the train station looking for them. That's when the Brotherhood of Mutants shows up and attacks. Now, let me just start off by saying, the Brotherhood of Mutants is a horrible name for a social group. Let's just throw that.
Are they even called the Brotherhood in this movie?
Yeah.
Like, I know Magneto keeps calling people brother, but maybe I missed it, but did they ever call them the Brotherhood?
In the beginning, they did.
At least they aren't called the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants like in the comics.
Like, I don't know, if you're trying to make social and political change, why would you call your group the Brotherhood anything? Like, that's just a bad name. That's just right there. It's like, okay, what the hell are they up to? They are up to no good. We can't trust them. Instead of Storm fighting Magneto and Wolverine fighting Sabretooth, as is their rivalry in the comics, it's switched. Toad and Sabretooth attack Storm and Cyclops in the train station, and Magneto goes onto the train to attack Wolverine and Rogue. And that's actually a really good scene. I was surprised by how much I was thrilled by it.
Oh god, it's brutal because Wolverine has a metal skeleton. Magneto controls metal. They are not a good matchup. Magneto, walks onto Wolverine's claws and twists them. And honestly, how did they who untwisted them? They're, really tough. When were they untwisted? I have questions.
I don't know. That beautiful metal doesn't run through your entire body, does it? And then he just lifts them up. Like, oh shit, it does. One thing that actually did occur to me in this film that I could have gone with more of in this franchise, not just this movie in general, but I feel like a one-on-one conversation between Wolverine and Magneto would be really interesting because they're both victims of inhumane experimentation against their will. They're both old souls with traumatic pasts. It seems like they'd kind of hit it off, you know?
Honestly, that would be a good scene to see in something, but you know what would happen? Magneto would be like, mankind will never accept us. And Wolverine would just say, eat a dick. And then try and stab him, and then Magneto would twist his claws. And then it would be over because Wolverine don't do the talk to the villain thing.
Yeah, very true. But it's in that scene, Wolverine asks Magneto, what the hell do you want from me? And Magneto basically tells him, I don't want you, I want the girl. So he wants Rogue all along.
Gasp! Who saw that coming?
I did, but, so he just knocks out Wolverine, knocks out Rogue, kidnaps her. He makes it into the train station where Toad and Sabretooth have been able to sort of subdue the X-Men.
Oh, side note?
What's that?
Cyclops goes down so easy. Toad, tongue whips, which is very gross, by the way. He tongue whips off Cyclops' visor, and Cyclops destroys the roof of the train station and brings down a bunch of rubble. Probably killed someone. I'm just saying, maybe Senator Kelly was right.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of got a point in this movie.
And Sabretooth is so fucking creepy to Storm. He, strangles her half to death and says, I want to hear you scream. Ugh.
Yeah. But then after that, Magneto, Sabretooth, and Toad, with Rogue as their captive, are met at the front of the train station surrounded by armed police. Magneto rips all the police's guns out of their hands, points it back at them, lifts up 2 police cars, slams it on 2 other ones, and basically holds the entire police captive just in a matter of seconds.
And it's fucking awesome.
Yeah. And then Charles Xavier, who's in a car on the other side of the whole confrontation, takes control of Sabretooth and Toad, and has Sabretooth grab Magneto by the neck, saying, let them go. It's such an interesting Mexican standoff. Telepathic is taking control of a lion man, holding the guy by the neck, and the other guy is literally using magnetic powers to hold all the guns at all the people in the way.
It's a fantastic scene. It's creative. It's visually striking.
Right.
And the best part, it gives us some great interaction between Magneto and Professor X. Their whole different philosophies running throughout this film and really the whole series is hope in humanity versus cynicism towards humanity. And it's just a great character relationship. It's fantastic.
It really is. But here's my question. If the genius Professor X was so smart, why didn't he just take control of Sabretooth and, I don't know, take off Magneto's helmet?
Ah, shit, you're right.
Again, it's...
In fact, a better question is, because it's confirming that Professor X can not only mind control people, but mind control multiple people at a time. That raises so many questions, well, I guess he's in a coma in the climax, but in other films, you totally should be able to just take control of the bad guy's mind.
Right.
And also, I don't know, maybe the ability to mind control government officials would be helpful in stopping the government from imprisoning all mutants. That's a thing Professor X should probably do.
But that would be wrong.
Always unwilling to make sacrifices.
Yep.
Mystique shows up in a helicopter and they fly away.
Back at the Xavier Mansion, Wolverine says he's going to leave to go save Rogue because he feels like she is his responsibility. This was the scene where I realized Halle Berry was doing an accent an hour into the movie. But Halle Berry is so beautiful in this, though. Oh my god.
Oh god, stop being horny on man.
I mean, here's the thing. Her wig in this movie doesn't always look super convincing.
It doesn't.
But Halle Berry is so beautiful in this. Just throwing that out there.
Wonder if you'll say the same thing when we review Catwoman.
I definitely will. As Wolverine opens the door to leave, a half-naked Senator Kelly shows up at their front door. How did he make it past the gates and presumably all the security? I don't know. Maybe he slithered past it with his new gelatin powers? I don't know. But now Senator Kelly's there, and they perform tests on him, and they find out that what exactly Magneto did to him is creating mutants, which, I don't know, I kind of felt like we already knew from earlier in the film, so it wasn't that big of a revelation. But we also learn that the mutation Magneto gave him is being rejected by the body, so it's actively killing him. And then they had a really good interaction with each other. Kelly and Professor X, he goes, I didn't know where to go. This was the only place I could think to come of because everywhere else I would have gone, I would have been treated like a mutant, like how you trying to treat us. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, take that, you fucking asshole, Kelly.
Yeah, and speaking of great interactions with Senator Kelly, right before Kelly dies...
Literally liquefies. Liquefies.
We'll talk about it in a minute. But right before that, he has a conversation with Storm where he asks her if she hates normal humans, and she says, sometimes, mostly I just fear them. And he is kind of shocked by that because his whole motivation is fear of mutants. And they fear him because he has men and power and guns and wants to kill them all. And as he dies, he says, well, you have one less to fear. And then he turns into water.
They literally show him liquefying on screen, and they show every single frame of it. Again.
And for a movie that came out in 2000, that's fucking impressive.
It's really good. And that was a really good interaction. Putting aside the fact that in the comics, Storm is not someone who necessarily fears. She's a lot more confident and strong-willed than that. But again, this is this interpretation, and it was a really good scene. Professor X tries to use Cerebro one more time to find out where they're taking Rogue, but because Mystique had sabotaged it, he gets knocked out and put into a coma. So now Professor X is out of commission. And one of the things that struck me upon my rewatching of this was just how fast-paced this movie is in general. And at the beginning, it's a good thing, but as the film goes on, I feel like that kind of becomes a detriment to the film as a whole because I didn't really get that connected to any of the emotional scenes with Rogue when she wasn't having a heart-to-heart with Wolverine. The whole Professor X being out of commission, that could have been devastating. The idea that their leader is out of commission and they have to do all this by themselves, that could be detrimental, but I feel like it's just breezed past so quickly. And, oh yay, he comes back in the end because we were so scared for him and stuff like that. There were so many emotional moments in this film that could have worked, but just were kind of breezed over due to the pacing.
So they fix Cerebro, apparently, and then Jean Grey uses it and she locates Rogue. Rogue is being held at the Statue of Liberty, which, honestly, I don't really think there's any reason that the UN meeting, by the way, there's a big UN meeting with like 200 world leaders, and Magneto's plan is to turn them all into mutants, and also because the machine would kill him, he's using Rogue instead, which by the way kind of makes him a dick and kind of ruins him as a character, but whatever. But anyway, there's no reason for the UN to have this meeting at Ellis Island, but it does give us a final battle at the Statue of Liberty, which is kind of cool.
We forgot to mention the UN stuff, but whatever. Jean Grey proves that she is a much more powerful telepath than she has been given credit for. She locates them. The UN, all the leaders, the world leaders, meet at Ellis Island. The Brotherhood enact their plan by traveling to the Statue of Liberty. And the crazy thing to me was Magneto straight up says, like when Rogue, the 17-year-old girl, asks him, "Are you gonna kill me?" And Magneto straight up says, "Yes, I am going to kill you."
Yeah, also, let's see, this
like,
is
again,
not too distant future.
Film,
let's say it's 10 years after it came out. This is 2010. Magneto, let's see, he was 10 during 1944, so that means the dude's in his 80s and he's going to kill a teenager. Like, I hate the fact that Magneto tries to kill Rogue. Yes, it makes a good climax, but it ruins him as a character. Because he's just a dick now. He's a selfish, cowardly asshole who isn't willing to die for his beliefs, but he is willing to murder.
I mean, I personally interpreted that as he's like willing to do whatever it takes. Granted, he doesn't
need Rogue. He could just do it himself.
Yeah, but he's also, like you said, a cowardly asshole, so...
Honestly, I just realized something.
What's that?
If he didn't try and kidnap Rogue, he wouldn't have alerted the X-Men, and his plan would have succeeded.
Exactly. I mean, come on, dude. Again, there's a lot of plot holes in this, and I'll get into that later.
Well, it's not plot holes. It's a writing decision I disagree with.
Yeah. Again, he straight up tells the underage girl that he is going to kill her. This film is a lot darker than what X-Men had really been.
I mean, X-Men has a long history of dark shit in the comics and in other films.
Very true. But I'm just saying, this film is really dark, and I mean that like thematically and visually. Like the cinematography of this, there's a lot of shadows, a lot of the color black, a lot of darkness on it, which is weird when you're adapting a film based on characters who are all wearing bright, colorful spandex outfits and shit like that. And that's actually a line that we get when the X-Men start suiting up and traveling to Liberty Island. Wolverine is staring at the generic black leather outfits that they gave him, and he goes, "You guys actually wear these things outside?" And Cyclops goes, "What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?"
Yes, I would.
I really would. As opposed to what? Generic black leather? Yeah, I would.
I bet Cyclops is the one who designed them, that asshole.
Yeah, I'm sure. They make it to Liberty Island, get into the Statue of Liberty, where the Brotherhood, well, particularly Toad and Mystique, attack the X-Men.
Yeah, and the teams break off to fight them. It's Mystique versus Wolverine, and then it's Toad versus everyone else, which I feel like he drew the short straw. Right. But at the same time, he does a really good job. Right. He takes on Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Storm at the same time and almost wins.
Exactly. Like, the action in the Wolverine versus Mystique fight, the action is very well filmed. It's well shot, it's creative, it's really well done. And then there's the fight between Toad, Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Storm, which isn't nearly as strong. Even the choreography, it's just like, at what point Toad uses his elastic tongue to throw Storm to the second floor, and then she looks over the edge, presumably is walking to the stairs to get back down, when we all know in this film she can fly. She just kind of walks a little bit and gives Toad the time to climb up the pillars and to get to the floor, where he like body slams her into the table.
Yeah, so the fight with Toad, he fucking destroys Cyclops and Jean Grey very easily. He spits on Jean's face, and then Cyclops has to deal with this. His fight with Storm is he kicks her down an elevator shaft, and then he's good. Then 5 minutes later, she floats back up and just electrocutes him. She kills Toad. She annihilates him with lightning. And as she does it, she says the dumbest line. "Do you know what happens to a toad when it gets struck by lightning?" the same thing that happens to everything else.
What?
That's a weird one-liner.
I mean,
from what I've read, it's a callback to a deleted scene, but it is weird in context.
it's pretty weird.
Also, Wolverine's fight with Mystique, not really sure what Mystique's plan was there. He's basically unstoppable, and you're, for all intents and purposes, a human martial artist. Like, you can shapeshift, but he doesn't give a shit. She, transforms into Wolverine and sticks out claws, and he just chops them off because they aren't real claws. And he stabs her in the chest.
After literally electrocuting the shit out of Toad with lightning, and Wolverine stabbing Mystique in the chest with his claws, they make it up to the top of the Statue of Liberty, where Magneto basically bends all the metal and imprisons them up against the walls of the, where they're, in the head, right? Yeah. In the head of the statue.
Are they in the bottom of the torch?
No, because on top of the torch is where they put the machine.
Right.
Because when Wolverine and Sabretooth have their fight, at one point Wolverine is almost thrown off, and he digs his claws in there, and it goes right in between Jean and Cyclops. So they're in the head.
Magneto chains them all up inside the head of the Statue of Liberty, and they can't escape. And he has Sabretooth guard them. And Wolverine stabs himself in the chest with his claws to push himself off the wall to get free. And then he has a little duel with Sabretooth. He finally gets a proper duel with Sabretooth. At one point, Sabretooth throws Wolverine at one of the, crown spikes on the Statue of Liberty. And Wolverine stabs into it and, swings around in a really weird physics spectacle.
That was the shot I was talking about earlier, that the CGI does not hold up. Good God, was that CGI horrible.
Is that not how it works?
Yeah. Added to the fact that that's not how physics works. That's a really important part on making CGI full-body characters. It's you gotta get the physics right. The physics in conception of that is not right. And therefore the CGI, in addition to being shit, is just gonna look unnatural. I will give them credit. Like I mentioned, they completely waste Sabretooth in this. They do attempt to give him and Wolverine a bit of a rivalry, but, they only have 2 fight scenes, and the first one is just Sabretooth knocking Wolverine out, and then stealing his dog tag. And then in this one, Wolverine gets his dog tag back and says, "Mine!" Then Sabretooth throws him off the head, but he's able to keep holding on with his claws. Wolverine is able to crawl back on. Jean uses her telekinesis to sort of reflect Cyclops' eyeball blast at Sabretooth, blow him out of the head of the Statue of Liberty, where he falls to the ground and lands in a boat.
And dies, presumably.
Yeah. Just throwing this out there, Sabretooth would have survived that. His powers would have allowed him to survive that. Just saying. They could have brought him, like I said, I just find it so bizarre that this film chose to set up the exploration of Wolverine's origin. Now you introduce Sabretooth, who is very important to Wolverine's origin, even in this franchise, and then they just do nothing with him. It just baffles me that they would even include him in the first place if they're just gonna waste him like they do. And that fall, due to his powers, would not have killed him, because he also has a healing factor. Equally, some argue even stronger than Wolverine's.
Really?
About on par with Wolverine. Wolverine would have survived that fall, and so would have Sabretooth. Just throwing that out there. They could have brought him back. Just saying. And I'm gonna say this right now. This is a hot take, but I know a lot of people agree with me. Liev Schreiber as Sabretooth in X-Men Origins Wolverine is much better than Sabretooth in this film. And you know that when someone says X-Men Origins Wolverine did it better, you know something's up with that. You know that's saying something. Because Liev Schreiber is, I think, one of the only good parts about that movie. Yeah, sure, his dialogue sucks. And his story, the writing and just the story and everything is ass. But Liev Schreiber was actually good as Sabretooth. And his relationship with Wolverine was actually good. In this, none of that is present. And they just wasted a really good character who barely speaks in this movie. Magneto hooks Rogue up to the machine, forces her to take his powers, where he's temporarily weakened. Cyclops blasts Sabretooth out of the head of the Statue of Liberty, and he just dies there because they didn't want him in the sequels, I guess. Magneto forces Rogue to begin the machine. She starts creating the radiation field that are soon to just completely consume the UN meeting and turn all the world's leaders into mutants and then kill them, because that's what happened to Senator Kelly, because the body will reject the mutation.
Yeah, and I feel like if you killed every world leader, yeah, that would probably be bad for your plans, Magneto. Just saying.
Yeah.
They would come down on you like the hammer of God. Every country in the world would be hunting you.
Storm uses her wind powers, and Jean Grey uses her telekinesis to get Wolverine up to the torch where he was trying to save Rogue. And he tells Cyclops that if he isn't able to do it in time, just blow the entire thing up, killing all of them. Although it would not have killed Wolverine. But Wolverine tries to stop the machine by just scratching it with his claws. Because Magneto is in his weakened state, Wolverine is strong enough to break through his powers and destroy the machine, but not before presumably killing Rogue and giving her a big white streak in her hair, which is also synonymous with her character in the comics. With Magneto passed out on the torch and Wolverine holding a presumably dead Rogue, he touches her to help her absorb his healing factor again to save her life, but it doesn't work. So he holds on to her. This man, this hardened, gruff, just badass man, who has grown to have such a strong relationship with this girl, has become like a father figure to her. He holds her presumably dead body, and cries over her because he wasn't able to save her in time. That is some powerful fucking imagery right there.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, Rogue starts absorbing his powers because she's still alive. She wakes up, but Wolverine passes out into a coma again.
Coma number 3. Yeah. And Charles also has a coma. This is a coma-tastic film.
You need a problem? Fucking put him in a coma. That's great for a movie story plot, right? Then the X-Men have saved the day. They get in their jet, which they keep below the basketball courts. Just throwing that out there. That's fun.
Oh god, imagine and I mean, that's not something this film invented. I'm pretty sure I've seen that in cartoons and stuff. But imagine if, you're just out playing basketball and then you fall into the jet engine.
It's one heck of a design flaw.
I mean, they probably have alarms and shit.
Yeah, probably. The X-Men fly away in the Blackbird, and they just leave Magneto behind to escape. He doesn't escape, but they just leave him behind. You'd think that all the shit that is just in the Xavier Mansion, they have a giant jet airplane below the basketball courts. Below the school, they have a giant laboratory. They have Cerebro. They have all this. You'd think they'd at least have, I don't know, a CW Flash style prison kinda to keep him in, but no, they just leave him behind there for the authorities to raid the Statue of Liberty and arrest him and throw him in a plastic prison. Oh, and they also find Mystique, but Mystique was able to disguise herself as a security guard, and that's how she got free in the end. Professor X wakes up from his coma. He tells Wolverine that he was able to find an abandoned facility that could potentially help him on his path to finding out what happened to him, why he doesn't remember where he got the adamantium, why he doesn't remember anything in the past 20, 30 years before a couple years ago. Wolverine leaves the Xavier Mansion, but not before saying goodbye to Rogue, who, when he touches her white streak in her hair, she responds by saying, "I kinda like it." Oh, that's nice. You like the white streak in your hair that's going to be a constant reminder of that time you were almost murdered by a supervillain.
Yeah, but it looks cool, Riley. Don't look into it. It
does look really cool, but I just think it's so weird. What's a 17-year-old girl saying? I kind of like that, the reminder of when I almost died.
Side note, you are being way more Southern than she actually is in the film.
She's pretty Southern.
They really downplay her very thick Southern accent from the comics.
True. I don't think Anna Paquin does the Southern accent super well in this movie. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. The final scene of this movie shows Magneto in a plastic prison playing chess against Professor X and discussing their different philosophies.
And they sequel bait the shit out of this movie.
Yeah, fair enough.
No, it's good. I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, it's they're basically have a conversation what are you going to do in the next movie? Well, I'm going to be there to stop you.
Probably going to continue to do this stuff. I'm kind of into it.
And that was the X-Men movie. This is definitely our longest review ever.
Oh god. It's not the longest. It's giant size. Oh boy.
All right.
Sorry for making everyone sit through
No, you're
this.
good. You're good. It was entertaining. This past week, I've been editing the clips for when we actually start making individual social media accounts for this. I've been editing those clips, and we come up with some good shit. We come up with some good comedy.
Yeah.
Some good points, some good discussions, also a lot of entertainment along with it, I think at least. But anyway, back to the review. Like I said, this film is not comic accurate whatsoever, and some of it works, some of it doesn't. I do like the darkness of this film, both thematically and visually. I know I talk about it, the X-Men in the comics and the animations are, super colorful and bright and have so much personality. That'd be nice, but I do think that this film does explore the trauma that comes along with these powers very, very well. As well as I do like the visual style of it. A lot of shadows, a lot of dark. It's very, very noir, almost, which was really nice to see. It's not accurate at all. A lot of the relationships between the characters, I think, could have benefited from a bit more comic accuracy. Some of them, particularly the one between Wolverine and Rogue, is super sweet and very well done. But, Rogue's relationship with Iceman did not need to be in this movie whatsoever. The love triangle, as you said, was stupid and a detriment to the characters. The rivalry between Wolverine and Sabretooth was such a missed opportunity. Keep in mind, I did like this movie. I just want to say that for the record. I did enjoy it a lot more than I did when I was younger. That said, there's several plot holes. It's very fast-paced, which is sometimes a detriment to the emotion of the scenes and to the story. Some of the special effects, both practical and digital, don't hold up very well. Others do. The plot is good. I wouldn't say it was generic. It's just good. I think that all the casting in conception is great, for the most part. But I feel like of the casting, it's really only Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Patrick Stewart as Professor X, and Ian McKellen as Magneto that really shine and just make this movie their own. Famke Janssen as Jean Grey, Halle Berry as Storm, and James Marsden as Cyclops. They were good ideas. They just don't get much screen time and they don't get a lot of good development. Anna Paquin was serviceable. Her acting, her development, it was fine. It was a thing. Didn't really have much emotion towards it. Didn't really care. Overall, I do think that it is a lot better than what I remember, but that said, I wouldn't go so far as to say it was great today. At the time, this is extremely influential to comic book films in general, and comic book films are a huge part of this show and this podcast.
Yeah.
So it's the impact that this movie had cannot be understated. That said, the sheer amount of plot holes and the pacing, some of the story beats, it's some of the flaws they go with, all the plot holes that are in it. It's that would work better in a big, bombastic, comic booky film. But then this film chose to go with a very grounded, serious, and dark style to it, and theme, tone to it, if you will. And I think that had they gone all the way with it, just adapted the X-Men animated show, perhaps, just gone all the way with it, the plot holes wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb quite as much. But in here, they do. But as far as comic book movies go, I had a lot of fun with it. Very enjoyable, very important to the genre, and I think that it's one that people should definitely give more of a chance than people are giving it these days.
Here's what I'll say about this film. I'm going to list off some things I don't like about this film. I do not like Cyclops. I do not like Jean Grey. I do not like Rogue. I have mixed feelings about the Brotherhood. I have mixed feelings about Storm. Now I'm going to say some good things about this film. This film contains some of the absolute best performances I've ever seen in a superhero movie. As we've stated many times, Hugh Jackman does amazing as Wolverine. Patrick Stewart is fantastic as Professor X. Ian McKellen is phenomenal. Honestly, this film would probably be better if it was just the scenes of Ian McKellen. That's a bit of an overstatement, but Ian McKellen is so good in this. This film has very complex, good themes. It's not just a dumb action movie. And there's some parts of this film I don't like, but it is a film that has some phenomenal scenes in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, the costumes suck.
That too. They really did.
Ready to give scores?
Yeah. I'm very glad that we have the opportunity to review this movie because I feel like it's no secret that the X-Men franchise has pretty much just petered out and amounted to nothing in the end, and now it's not going to matter because pretty soon the X-Men are going to be rebooted into the MCU and they're going to be new actors, new characters, and that's all that's going to matter. But I think that us having the chance to talk about this sort of cements the idea that this film is extremely important to superhero films in general, as we have mentioned several times over. And I think that it's good that we don't forget it. I hope that by reviewing this, people realize that this film is extremely important and very entertaining, but also to just not forget it, you know? That said, as I mentioned, all the flaws and positives, in general, I think I'm going to give X-Men a 7.5 out of 10.
8.5 out of 10. I gave a lot of 8.5s in the early days of the show, but I haven't given them in a while. But yeah, it's that. It's a solid movie.
You know, to be perfectly honest with you, like I said, I went into this movie not expecting much because I had seen it and I really wasn't the biggest fan of it. I remember last episode, you and I talked about how we've kind of gotten to a rut of like movies that they're not great.
Let's
but they're
see.
Not, like, super
Dr.
bad.
No, 5.75. New Frontiers, 6. Zardos, 5.5. Holiday Special, 1.75. Worst film we've seen on this podcast.
Yeah, but like after the Star Wars Holiday Special, we did 3 movies in a row where we were just both like, some good ideas, just overall not the greatest, you know? So just sort of mediocre films overall, the last 3 episodes. And I fully went into this week expecting this to be another one of those mediocre episodes. But to my pleasant surprise, that was not. I actually really dug this movie a lot more than I thought I was going to.
Oh, by the way, speaking of past few episodes, the episode that's coming out this week when we're recording it is The New Frontier. And that movie had so many things I wish was expanded upon that I went and I read the book, and it's so much better. Just saying.
I need to check that out.
It's good. It's real good. Riley, where can they find you?
You can all find me on YouTube at Riley Thorpe. You can see all of my latest short films. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Riley James Thorpe.
You can find me on Twitter at Jarmes Casey, JarmesCasey. You can find just basically everything I do at caseyjarmes.wordpress.com. Let me just double check that URL, by the way. Yeah, caseyjarmes.wordpress.com. We'll be back next week, assuming we don't get struck by lightning. And, you know, when people get struck by lightnings, it's just like when toads get struck by lightning, which is just like when anything gets struck by lightning. They die.
Yep.
And you know, next week, Riley, do you know what next week is? Next week is Groundhog's Day. And we're doing something incredibly fitting for Groundhog's Day.
Yep.
We're talking about Star Wars. Remember back in episodes 6 and 8 how we did movie pitches? We're doing a Star Wars pitch again. Yep. Well, a pitch again, this time Star Wars.
Casey and I next week will be pitching our ideas for a Star Wars movie. Casey will pitch his idea, and then I'll pitch my individual idea, and it's going to be a great time.
Oh, God, I cannot wait.
So can I. Not to pat myself on the back, but I got a pretty good idea.
The goal of mine is to make you and the audience just walk away in frustration when you realize what mine is.
I'm looking forward to it more now.
We'll be talking about that next week. As always, I'm Casey Jarmes.
And I'm Riley Thorpe.
And hey, it's just a movie. Don't lose your head about it, especially not to a ladder.